In the world of combat sports, there are few things more hated than an eye poke. And even though it may not be intended, it can cause serious damage and put an abrupt end to a fight. Hey there, and this is my channel. Today I'm tell you why the eye poke is the most hated foul in all of fighting. Before we get started, please hit that like button. It really helps me out. And if you enjoy these videos, subscribe for more. Also stick around until the end of this one, because I have a special announcement to make. Eye pokes have ended fights, destroyed careers, and caused serious injury. One such instance was that of Vitor Belfort. In 2004, he was scheduled to fight for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship against Randy Couture. It was the main event of UFC 52, but before the first round began, Belfort rubbed his fingers into his eye socket. When he opened his eye, it popped right out of its socket and hung by its blood vessels. To say this shocked the audience would be a horrific understatement. The fight was obviously canceled, and Belfort's career was basically over, though he did return to the UFC in 2019 as a coach for the Ultimate Fighter Brazil 4, and has since returned to fighting in his own promotion, which he founded called Eagle FC. Okay, so maybe getting your eye completely ripped out of its socket isn't something that happens too often. But when it does happen, it's pretty awful. And although Belfort's story is extremely grotesque, it's also fairly unique. So let's take a look at another example. It's time involving two fighters who were both relatively unknown at the time. It took place at a small MMA show in Oklahoma called Gladiator. In the third round of their lightweight bout, Kevin Phillips poked Tyson Olofsson directly in the eye. This caused him to instantly swell up and become almost blind. Olofsson was unable to continue the fight, and it was stopped due to doctor's advice. The ring announcer actually said, "This one's stopped by the doctor." Doctor said he couldn't continue due to the swelling in his eye. You could barely see anything out of his left eye. Unfortunately, this happened in 2015, and back then, Gladiator wasn't a very big show. There wasn't much media coverage, and there weren't many people watching in attendance either. So although Olofsson was seriously injured, nobody knew about it until nearly a year later when the footage surfaced online. Luckily, Olofsson was able to recover and still fight today. He's currently 8-3 as a pro. But this is another example of how one single poke can ruin a person's life, if they are uncareful. So what makes the eye poke the most hated foul in all of fighting? Is it simply because it hurts? Well, yes, it definitely doesn't feel good to get poked in the eye. But if you ask any martial artist, they will tell you that any part of your body can hurt if you get hit hard enough. But that's not what makes the eye poke so bad. I mean, if you're going to poke someone in the eye, you need to know that it hurts. Fighters train hard, and they know that they are getting hit with powerful strikes meant to do damage every single time they step into the ring or the cage. So again, it's not that it hurts, that's just part of fighting. But sometimes an eye poke doesn't even need to connect for it to be a problem. Just ask former UFC light heavyweight champion Chuck Liddell. Back in 2007, he was preparing to fight Wanderlei Silva in the main event of Pride Shockwave 2007, but unfortunately the fight never happened. During the weigh-ins, Liddell accidentally poked Silva right in the eye. Silva instantly began screaming bloody murder. And when Liddell realized what had happened, he immediately apologized. Even though no one meant for this to happen, Silva was furious. And after waiting for nearly 10 minutes for his eye to recover, he refused to fight and was disqualified. After the disqualification, Silva stormed off and Liddell followed after him to try and talk things through, but Silva had none of it. For years afterwards, Silva continued to demand that the fight be rescheduled, and eventually even went to court to try and force it to happen. However, Liddell and the organization refused, and it never took place. Because of this, Liddell never fought in Pride again. And although he had nothing to do with this decision, he was actually released from his contract soon after. In fact, he didn't fight again for almost 3 years, all because of a poke that never even connected. This is perhaps the most extreme example of how an eye poke can destroy everything. There have been countless eye pokes that have stopped fights dead in their tracks. Only takes one solid poke from an open-fingered glove to send a fighter sprawling to the canvas in pain. A lot of times, this will result in a temporary suspension of the fight while the injured fighter tries to recover. And if they can't, the fight gets stopped and a winner is declared. Sometimes this happens multiple times during a single match, like in the case of Quinton Jackson versus Chuck Liddell at UFC 71. Jackson poked Liddell in the eye several times during the first round, But each time Liddell recovered and the fight continued. Eventually, Jackson knocked him out in the second. But that still doesn't explain why the eye poke is the most hated foul in all of fighting. Many people say that the eye poke should be made illegal and that the gloves should be redesigned to prevent them from happening. This seems like a pretty straightforward solution, so why don't they just do it? Well, that's because the eye poke isn't always accidental. Sometimes fighters intentionally poke their opponents in the eye because they know it will give them an advantage. If the referee sees this happening, they will stop the fight and assess a penalty, usually a warning or a point deduction. But the thing is, unless it's blatant, it can be hard to determine whether or not a poke was intentional or accidental. If a fighter accidentally pokes someone in the eye and causes them serious injury, that same fighter probably wouldn't do it on purpose. But if they intentionally poke someone in the eye and cause them serious injury, well, that sounds like a cheap shot. And whether it's intentional or not, if a fighter gets poked in the eye hard enough, they are going to react in pain. If they have no other option, they might try to gouge out the eye to relieve the pain. I mean, what else are they supposed to do? They can't just sit there and take it. Mama gloves are designed to protect the fighter's hands and the other fighter's face. They're made of layers of foam padding covered by leather to cushion punches and absorb impact. But if a fighter intentionally pokes them in the eye, well, that wasn't what they were designed for, and they won't protect against it. The best way to prevent an eye poke is to avoid it altogether. And the only way to do that is with proper technique. If a fighter keeps their elbows tight to their body and keeps their wrists straight, it drastically reduces the chance of being poked. Some fighters even wear protective eyewear to prevent themselves from getting poked, especially if their opponent has a history of doing it. But these aren't foolproof either, as some pokes can get through the smallest of gaps. So what do you think? Do you agree that the eye poke is the most hated foul in all of fighting? Or is there another foul that you hate even more? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.